The birth and growth of the coal industry in Pennsylvania fueled a new frontier of industry and immigration. The demand for coal sparked a wave of Italian, Polish, Irish, and Slavic immigration that led to the mixtures and collisions of European and American cultures. This is what changed the culture and face of Pennsylvania. Coal was critical to the United States Industrial Revolution, and all of the country's anthracite coal came from Pennsylvania. Coal is a black or brownish-black sedimentary mineral deposit composed predominantly of carbon that is readily combustible. It is formed from plant remains that have been compacted, hardened, chemically altered, and transformed by heat and pressure over geological time. Anthracite coal burns with intense heat and produces a blue flame, making it excellent for heating and metal production, but its rarity makes it more expensive than bituminous coal. Before the discovery of coal, Pennsylvania was a rural place filled with big forests, mountains, rolling hills, and large farms. The people that lived there were mostly farmers and hunters. Philip Ginder was on Sharp Mountain near modern-day Pottsville in 1791 when he discovered some anthracite. Ginder first took the coal to Joseph Smith, a blacksmith who ignited the fuel after many tries. Historians mark the date, February 11, 1808, as the day on which Judge Jesse Fell produced his invention of an iron grate that would maintain a fire using anthracite coal. Judge Fell's invention may not have been the first grate to successfully burn anthracite, but because it was the first iron grate in the Wyoming Valley to successfully burn anthracite, this invention marks the beginning of a new era and the end of a quiet rural life for everyone who lived in the valley. The War of 1812 began and caused a fuel shortage in Pennsylvania. The vast woodlands of southeast Pennsylvania were being quickly depleted. Jacob Sisk saw the opportunity and began delivering anthracite to Philadelphia by wagon and barge on a regular basis in 1815. War ended and lower fuel prices were the end of Sisk's operation. Josiah White and Erskine Hazard, two of Sisk's customers, were impressed by the possibilities of anthracite that they risked their entire fortunes and started the Lehigh Coal and Navigation Company in 1822. Without coal, there was no reason to build the first canals, and without coal, there was certainly no reason to extend the canals and rail lines into the mountain valleys of northeast Pennsylvania. Eventually, coal operations spread throughout Pennsylvania, creating a large new labor demand in PA. After seeing earlier immigration of Northern and Western Europeans, the United States received a wave of immigrants from Eastern and Southern Europe. Many of these immigrants were drawn to Pennsylvania's anthracite mines for employment. I interviewed Paul Shackle, an anthropology professor at University of Maryland. We talked about why people were fleeing Europe to come to work in the coal mines.
In the late 19th century, close to 50,000 people were dying a year in Europe due to starvation because of crop failures. And it was going on for quite some time. And the majority of that was happening in the area of Poland. So people were running away from that, thinking that they could have a better start somewhere else.
Most of the immigrants from England and Wales already had mining experience and were moved into positions of management in the mines. The Irish were suffering from the potato famine and were starving. They were not as skilled in mining as they were farmers before the potato famine. By the late 19th century, Italy had finally been brought under one flag, but the people were not quite unified. Decades of internal struggle had left widespread poverty in Italy. Many miners lived in rental housing that was in rurally isolated company towns like Eckley Mining Village that served the interests of the company. The company controlled commercial, educational, and medical facilities that utilized private security guards who routinely denied workers of their civil rights.
You have to buy your picks and axes, and you have to buy your food from the company store, which charged you 20% more than the regular store. So next thing you know, you're in debt to the company.
The boom of immigrants flooding into the small towns of Pennsylvania also caused some friction. During the mid-19th century, the anthracite coal regions of eastern Pennsylvania saw a huge influx of Irish immigrants looking for work. When searching for work, they would see help wanted signs, but often followed by the words, "Irish need not apply." In 1864, the Workingmen's Benevolent Association was formed in Pennsylvania to help enforce appropriate and safer mining conditions. Due to the self-serving attitude of the WBA, the Irish decided to form their own group called the Ancient Order of Hibernians. They sought to provide fairness for the Irish working class and were willing to punish those who mistreated workers. Many of the Irish immigrants originated from oppressed regions of Ireland, where the Molly Maguires fought for human rights. The Molly Maguires were a secret group, and many believed the AOH was their cover. In 1875, they resorted to the first important open coal dispute known as the Long Strike. Both the unions and the coal companies were responsible for numerous violent acts during the strike, including violent brawls, sabotage, and even coordinated murder. Eventually, the violence got out of hand and the coal companies moved to put a stop to the chaos. James McParland was recruited by the coal companies to infiltrate the AOH and provide enough incriminating evidence to bring them to trial. During the long strike, McParland assumed the alias of James McKenna and infiltrated the AOH. He first became a member of the AOH in Schuylkill County by swearing he was a member of the Buffalo, New York chapter. From there, he gradually worked his way deeper and deeper into the organization, eventually being initiated into the secretive Molly Maguires. With the assistance of McParland, the police were able to arrest over 60 men in 1875 accused of being linked to the Molly Maguires. These arrests made it possible to break the miners' strike. The mine owners wanted more. From 1875 to 1877, a series of trials were held in Pottsville, Pennsylvania, to uncover alleged crimes committed by the Molly Maguires. The trials resulted in 20 men being sentenced to hang. The Molly Maguires were only one example of the labor fight in the region during this period. In Luzerne County, a number of historic strikes erupted, including 1897 protest, where more than 10,000 employees abandoned their post. This forced many mines to close and culminated in the Latimer Massacre, which occurred outside Hazleton. The massacre occurred in a time when established American citizens were afraid of the nation losing its white Anglo-Saxon identity with the new immigrants coming to America. These immigrants were seen as inferior, with strange customs and different languages. The United Mine Workers of America, or UMWA, was formed in 1890.
The reason why they were created was to keep the foreign workers out. They wanted to protect the jobs of the English speakers.
On August 21st, 1897, the Campbell Act passed.
The company was taxed 3 cents a day for each foreign worker, but they passed that on to the workers. And then when the workers saw that money coming out of their paychecks, that's when they went on strike, which led to the Latimer strike in 1897.
The morning of Sunday, September 10, 1897, a group of miners gathered for a rally in the coal patch town of Harwood, just outside Hazleton, to protest the ongoing operations. Carrying an American flag, the men, mostly from Eastern Europe, began a peaceful march to Latimer in the early afternoon. Luzerne County Sheriff James Martin and his deputies harassed 400 or so men as they walked. At 3:45 p.m. at the edges of Latimer, there was a confrontation. Deputies and coal company police lined the sides of the road. About 150 of the men were armed with rifles and pistols. Martin ordered the miners to stop their march. Some miners continued to push forward. Someone yelled fire, and several men immediately fell dead in their tracks. The rest of the miners turned and began to run away, but the firing continued for about 2 minutes, and over a dozen protesters were shot in the back while fleeing. 19 men died that day, and as many as 5 or more died from gunshot wounds later that week. Almost immediately, the 19 immigrant men who fell at Latimer were transformed into symbols of the labor struggle in the anthracite region. John Mitchell called for a strike and added a plea for a more inclusive union. "The coal you dig isn't Slavic, Polish, or Irish coal. It's just coal," he exclaimed. That became the rallying slogan for the 1900 strike, as well as the 1902 anthracite coal strike, which won better working conditions, a shorter workday, and wage hikes.
They fought for better conditions, and some of these better conditions were legislated. They became law in the state of Pennsylvania.
Coal created a new frontier in Pennsylvania, where before the Commonwealth was a traditional frontier of woods and wilderness. Because of coal, it became a frontier of people and production. Pennsylvania provided the fuel for America's Industrial Revolution and created the factories that built modern America. Without coal and the frontiers it opened up, both Pennsylvania and America would be a very different place. The frontiers and mixing of peoples in coal patch towns and the larger industrialized cities created a complex state with varied regions and cultures. The change in the cultural makeup of Pennsylvania was fueled by coal. Without coal, Pennsylvania would likely have remained a less industrialized state.